For thousands of years, their civilization believed peace was the strongest force in the galaxy. Their species had risen not through conquest, but through knowledge, cooperation, and patience. While other civilizations built empires through war, they built alliances through trust. Their fleets existed mainly to defend trade routes and exploration missions. Their worlds were centers of learning, science, and diplomacy. Across dozens of star systems, their people lived without fear of extinction. Then the Empire appeared. No warnings came first. No negotiations. Just warships emerging from hyperspace above distant colonies and turning entire civilizations into debris fields within hours. The Empire expanded with brutal efficiency, conquering everything in its path. Their fleets were vast, their weapons overwhelming, and their doctrine simple. If a civilization resisted, it was erased. If it surrendered, it was enslaved. At first, the Alien Council believed diplomacy could still work. They sent envoys carrying messages of peace. They offered trade, technology, and cooperation. Every message returned unanswered. Every envoy vanished. Soon their allies began to fall. One system after another went dark. Entire civilizations that had existed for thousands of years disappeared from galactic communication networks. Defensive fleets were destroyed faster than they could be rebuilt. Refugees flooded the remaining safe systems, bringing stories of planets burning beneath endless waves of enemy warships. Even then, many leaders still believed the war could be contained. They were wrong. Eventually, the Empire reached their core worlds. The home system that had stood for millennia suddenly became the center of a war they had never truly prepared to fight. Emergency fleets gathered in orbit while civilian transports fled deeper into space. The defenders assembled everything they had left, thousands of ships forming a final protective line around their homeworld. The Empire arrived with 10 times that number. The battle that followed was not a contest. It was a slow collapse. Defensive platforms were torn apart within minutes. Entire squadrons vanished under coordinated bombardment. Communication networks filled with desperate reports as ship after ship was destroyed trying to hold the line. Still they fought. Even when the outcome was obvious, their fleets refused to abandon the planet. Commanders knew the war was lost, but they chose to buy time for as many civilians as possible to escape. Hours later, the final defensive formation broke apart. The homeworld burned beneath orbital bombardment, while the last surviving ships scattered into deep space carrying refugees and fragments of a civilization that had once believed itself safe. What remained gathered quietly in hidden locations far from the battlefield. Among them was a small research station drifting in a remote asteroid field, protected by stealth systems and outdated defenses. Inside that station, the last surviving scientists and diplomats studied the growing list of destroyed systems. Every known ally was gone. Communication channels that once connected dozens of civilizations now returned only silence. Entire regions of the galaxy had fallen under the Empire's control. Even long-standing neutral powers had vanished without a trace. For the first time in their recorded history, their people faced a reality they had never imagined. They were alone. The council aboard the station debated their final options. Some argued for complete evacuation beyond the galaxy's edge. Others suggested hiding indefinitely among uncharted systems. A few believed surrender might still preserve what little remained of their species. But one scientist proposed something different. A long-range distress signal. Their civilization possessed transmitters capable of broadcasting across enormous distances. Normally they were used for exploration missions or diplomatic contact with distant allies. Now they would be used for something far more desperate. A call for help. Many doubted the idea immediately. Every known ally had already fallen. If powerful civilizations had been destroyed so easily, what hope could an unknown species possibly provide? But the scientist insisted on one point. Somewhere in the vastness of the galaxy, there might still be someone listening. Someone untouched by the Empire's expansion. Someone willing to answer. After hours of debate, the council agreed. There was nothing left to lose. Technicians powered up the ancient transmitter, its systems humming as energy flooded the massive communication array. The device was designed to send signals far beyond the reach of ordinary transmissions, carrying messages across thousands of light years. The message itself was simple. No formal diplomacy. No complex negotiation. Just a plea. This is an emergency broadcast from a surviving member of the Galactic Coalition. Our civilization is under attack. Our allies have fallen. Our worlds are being destroyed. If any civilization receives this message, we request assistance. The signal repeated automatically, cycling across multiple frequencies and languages used throughout known space. If anyone hears this, please respond. Once the transmission began, there was nothing left to do but wait. Days passed. No response came. The Empire continued advancing across nearby systems, hunting the scattered survivors of the fallen civilization. Reports arriving from hidden probes confirmed what the Council already suspected. The galaxy was losing the war. Eventually, even the scientists monitoring the transmitter stopped expecting an answer. The signal continued broadcasting into deep space, but most of them believed it would simply fade into cosmic noise. A final message sent by a dying civilization. Far away, across an immense stretch of interstellar darkness, the transmission continued traveling outward. Past abandoned colonies. Past silent battlefields. Past stars that had never hosted intelligent life. For weeks the signal moved unnoticed through the void. Then it reached a quiet region of space surrounding an unremarkable yellow star. Orbiting that star was a small blue planet whose dominant species had only recently begun exploring beyond its own system. A planet known as Earth. As the ancient distress signal passed through the outer edges of the system, something unexpected happened. Hidden within the transmission was a dormant identifier, an ancient diplomatic marker encoded centuries earlier by explorers who had long since vanished. The signal touched Earth's monitoring networks. And deep within humanity's oldest classified systems, a protocol that had slept for generations suddenly activated. Thousands of years before their civilization faced extinction, their explorers had traveled through a quiet and unremarkable region of the galaxy. It was not an area filled with powerful empires or advanced civilizations. Most star systems there were young, unstable, or lifeless. The mission had been routine: chart new routes, study emerging planets, and continue mapping the outer edges of known space. During that expedition, their sensors detected something unusual. One small blue planet orbiting a yellow star showed signs of a recent planetary catastrophe. Geological scans revealed evidence of a massive extinction event that had nearly wiped out complex life. Ecosystems were unstable, climate systems were damaged, and entire species had vanished within a short geological window. By most projections, the planet should have entered a long biological recovery period lasting millions of years. Yet something on the surface didn't match those predictions. Life was rebuilding faster than expected. Exploration drones sent into orbit observed a dominant species already spreading across multiple environments. These creatures were physically weak compared to many predators on the planet. They lacked natural armor, claws, or extreme biological adaptations. Their survival seemed unlikely in such a hostile world. But the more the explorers studied them, the stranger the situation became. The species endured conditions that should have eliminated them long ago. Ice ages reshaped the continents. Massive predators dominated the food chain. Diseases moved through early populations with devastating effect. Still, the species adapted. Every crisis forced them to change their tools, their behavior, and their communities. They built shelters against the cold. They created weapons against predators. They formed cooperative groups that increased their chances of survival. Even when disasters destroyed entire populations, the survivors rebuilt and spread again. The explorers began observing them more closely. This species did not survive because it was the strongest. It survived because it refused to stop trying. That quality fascinated the expedition leaders. Many advanced civilizations had once faced extinction threats, but few demonstrated such relentless recovery at such an early stage of development. A debate began among the explorers. Their civilization had strict laws regarding primitive worlds. Interference in the natural development of young species was heavily restricted. Allowing civilizations to evolve without outside influence was considered essential for maintaining balance across the galaxy. Yet this planet was dangerously close to ecological collapse. Further environmental instability could easily trigger another extinction cycle. If that happened, the dominant species currently struggling to survive might vanish entirely. Some members of the expedition believed the correct decision was to leave the planet untouched. Natural evolution would determine whether the species survived or disappeared. Others disagreed. They argued that the explorers had already intervened indirectly simply by observing the planet. If the world collapsed when they had the ability to prevent it, the decision would become a moral failure rather than neutrality. After long discussion, the expedition leader authorized a limited operation. The goal was not to guide the species or accelerate its development. Instead, they would stabilize the planet's environment just enough to prevent total ecological collapse. Orbital devices were deployed quietly beyond the planet's detection capability. Atmospheric regulators repaired damaged climate cycles. Small gravitational stabilizers reduced tectonic disruptions that could trigger global disasters. Several unstable ecosystems were subtly corrected to allow biodiversity to recover. The operation lasted only a short time by the explorers' standards. When it was finished, the planet's long-term survival probability increased dramatically. The dominant species never knew it had been helped. To them, the slow environmental recovery simply appeared as natural change across generations. Their struggle for survival continued exactly as before. They still faced predators, harsh climates, and countless dangers. But the thin line between survival and extinction had been quietly reinforced. Before leaving the system, the explorers recorded the event in their cultural archives. Their civilization believed every act of assistance created a bond between two peoples, even if the second party never realized it. The entry was small compared to their major diplomatic alliances. The species on that planet was still primitive, barely capable of agriculture and early social organization. It would take thousands of years before it even began experimenting with technology capable of reaching space. Still, tradition required the act to be acknowledged. So the explorers logged a ceremonial record within their diplomatic network. An alliance entry. Not a formal treaty requiring cooperation or obligations. Instead, it was a symbolic gesture recognizing that their civilization had once protected the survival of another. The record included a small piece of encoded communication data attached to the archive entry. It functioned as a dormant diplomatic identifier, something used by their communication systems to recognize the relationship if either civilization ever encountered the other again. Once the archive entry was completed, the explorers departed the system and continued their mission. Generations passed. Their civilization expanded across new regions of the galaxy, formed alliances with advanced species, and slowly forgot the minor act of compassion performed during that distant expedition. The archive record remained buried deep within their historical databases, rarely accessed and mostly irrelevant compared to the vast diplomatic network they built afterward. Meanwhile, the species on that small blue planet continued evolving. They developed agriculture, built cities, fought wars, formed nations, and slowly discovered the scientific laws governing their universe. Their technology advanced through centuries of trial and error. Machines replaced simple tools. Energy networks powered entire civilizations. Eventually, they reached space. They explored their own solar system, constructed orbital habitats, and began sending vessels beyond their home star. The species that had once struggled to survive predators and ice ages transformed into a technologically capable civilization. They called themselves humans. But none of this history remained connected to the ancient explorers who had once saved their world. That forgotten act of kindness stayed hidden in the alien archives for thousands of years. Until the moment their civilization faced extinction and sent a desperate distress signal into deep space. Because buried within that signal, without anyone realizing it, the dormant diplomatic identifier from that ancient archive entry was automatically included. A small piece of forgotten data traveling silently through the stars. A message carrying a code that would mean nothing to most of the galaxy. but to one particular civilization, orbiting a yellow star called Sol, it would trigger something humanity had never expected to receive. Far from the collapsing alien front lines, the Sol system moved through its ordinary routines. Cargo vessels traveled between colonies. Defense stations monitored the outer edges of human territory. Deep space listening networks scanned the galaxy for unusual signals, a habit humanity had maintained since the first generation of interstellar travel. Most transmissions they detected were meaningless, natural cosmic noise, dying stars, or stray communications drifting across empty space. Then one signal appeared that did not behave like any natural phenomenon. It repeated with precise structure, cycling through patterns that indicated deliberate construction. Long-range receivers captured fragments first, then the entire broadcast as the transmission moved deeper into the solar system. Automated analysis systems flagged it as artificial immediately. Within seconds, the signal was routed through layers of military and scientific monitoring networks designed to evaluate unknown communications. Language algorithms began attempting translation, while encryption scanners searched for recognizable patterns. That was when something unexpected happened. A dormant protocol buried inside the deepest levels of humanity's classified communication archives suddenly activated. The system recognized a specific identifier embedded in the signal. No one in the monitoring station had ever seen that protocol before. It existed within a section of the database rarely accessed by modern analysts, protected by security layers older than many of the surrounding systems. Yet the recognition code was clear. Alliance distress call detected. At first, the technicians believed it was a malfunction. Humanity had never publicly established alliances with extraterrestrial civilizations. Official records showed no confirmed diplomatic contact with alien species, only distant observations and unverified signals. But the protocol did not shut down. Instead, it began unlocking sealed historical files connected to the identifier inside the transmission. Archived research reports, geological studies, and long-forgotten intelligence documents appeared on secured displays. Many of them dated back centuries to the earliest scientific investigations of Earth's prehistoric extinction events. Individually, the reports seemed unrelated. Together, they revealed something astonishing. Multiple independent studies had discovered unexplained anomalies in the planet's recovery after one particular extinction period. Atmospheric chemistry had stabilized faster than expected. Climate fluctuations had corrected themselves with unusual precision. Several ecological systems recovered in patterns that did not fully match natural models. For decades, scientists had dismissed the irregularities as incomplete data. But hidden beneath those reports were classified files suggesting another explanation. Evidence of external intervention. Unknown orbital devices might have briefly influenced Earth's environment thousands of years earlier. The technology responsible had never been identified, and no physical artifacts remained. Whoever performed the intervention had left almost no trace. Except one. Embedded within the newly received distress signal was a diplomatic identifier matching the theoretical signature proposed in those ancient research files. The conclusion became unavoidable. An extraterrestrial civilization had once intervened to stabilize Earth's biosphere during a critical moment in its evolutionary history. Without that intervention, humanity's development might have ended before it truly began. And now that same civilization was broadcasting a distress call. The translation algorithms finally completed their work, converting the message into human language. This is an emergency broadcast from a surviving member of the Galactic Coalition. Our civilization is under attack. Our allies have fallen. Our worlds are being destroyed. If any civilization receives this message, we request assistance. Silence filled the monitoring center as analysts read the words. Humanity had spent centuries wondering if intelligent life existed elsewhere in the galaxy. Now the first confirmed message from another civilization was a call for help. The discovery moved rapidly through secure communication channels to the highest levels of planetary command. Military leaders, scientific advisors, and political representatives gathered to review the evidence. The situation required only one question to be answered. Did humanity owe this civilization anything? The historical data provided the answer. Without the ancient intervention recorded in those files, the chain of events that eventually produced human civilization might never have occurred. The unknown explorers who saved Earth's biosphere had done so without recognition, payment, or even acknowledgement. They simply helped a struggling world survive. Now their descendants were facing extinction. The decision was not complicated. Human culture had always valued loyalty and the repayment of debts. Across history, individuals and nations alike built reputations on honoring those who stood beside them in times of crisis. Ignoring the distress call was never seriously considered. Command authorities activated emergency mobilization protocols across human space. Secure orders traveled instantly through military networks connecting fleets stationed around Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies. Shipyards accelerated construction schedules. Defense platforms prepared long-range weapon systems. Carrier groups recalled patrol squadrons scattered across nearby sectors. Within hours, dozens of warships were preparing for deep space deployment. Navigation teams calculated the origin point of the distress signal. The journey would push human hyperspace drives close to their operational limits, but the route was possible. Fleet commanders received a single directive attached to the mobilization orders. Alliance protocol acknowledged. Distress call confirmed. Humanity would respond. Across the solar system, warships began aligning their jump drives toward a distant region of the galaxy where an unknown civilization waited for help it no longer expected to receive. The remnants of the alien civilization watched their sensors with fading hope. The Empire had already claimed most of their territory, and the few survivors drifting through nearby systems knew their time was running out. Enemy fleets continued sweeping the region, destroying hidden stations and hunting every remaining ship. Their homeworld was no longer safe. Orbital defenses had been shattered weeks earlier. The planet's skies burned with the debris of destroyed warships, and vast regions of the surface were scarred by bombardment. What remained of their government operated from scattered emergency shelters and hidden command posts. The research station that had sent the distress signal remained concealed within a dense asteroid field at the edge of the system. Its stealth system still functioned, but the scientists inside knew it was only a matter of time before enemy scanners eventually detected them. Still, the transmitter continued repeating the same message into deep space. "If anyone hears this, please respond." Days passed without change. Nearby monitoring probes confirmed that the Empire's forces were tightening their control of the system. New warships arrived regularly through hyperspace gates, reinforcing the armada that already surrounded the ruined planet. Their enemy had no reason to hurry. Victory was already certain. Inside the station, the Council quietly accepted the reality that their civilization had reached its final chapter. Records of their culture, science, and history were being compressed into long-term data vaults that might survive long enough to drift into deep space. Perhaps someday another species would find them and learn that their people had once existed. The distress signal itself had become symbolic rather than practical. Most of the scientists monitoring the transmitter understood that the message would likely travel forever without reaching anyone capable of helping. Even if another civilization did receive it, what power could they possibly bring against an empire that had already defeated so many advanced species? Then their sensors detected something impossible. A gravitational distortion appeared at the far edge of the system. At first it was small, barely noticeable against the background fluctuations of normal space. But within seconds the readings intensified. Multiple distortions began forming simultaneously, spreading across a wide region of empty space. Hyperspace jump signatures. The scientists stared at their instruments in confusion. The Empire already controlled the system. No major fleets were scheduled to arrive according to the enemy communication intercepts. Yet the distortions continued growing stronger, each one indicating the arrival of a massive vessel transitioning from faster-than-light travel. Then the first ship emerged. Its design did not match any known Empire vessel. The hull was angular and heavily armored, built for durability rather than elegance. Massive propulsion arrays burned along the rear structure while weapon systems lined the outer frame in dense formations. Before the observers could fully analyze it, another ship appeared beside it. then another. Within moments, dozens of vessels exited hyperspace, forming a rapidly expanding formation near the outer edge of the system. Long-range sensors struggled to process the data as more jump signatures ignited across the surrounding void. Hundreds of warships began arriving. Their technology looked unfamiliar compared to the sleek designs favored by most galactic civilizations. The ships appeared blunt, almost industrial in structure, but every skin revealed enormous weapon outputs and reinforced defensive plating. The alien scientists exchanged stunned looks. No known ally possessed ships like these. A transmission signal suddenly appeared on their communication channels. At first, the language was unrecognizable, composed of complex audio patterns and digital structures. Their translation systems immediately began decoding the signal, comparing it against known linguistic frameworks. Within seconds, the meaning became clear. Distress signal received. A brief pause followed, as if the sender wanted to ensure the message was understood. Alliance treaty acknowledged. The scientists looked at one another in disbelief. The translation continued. This is the United Human Fleet. Another pause filled the channel before the final statement arrived. Humanity answers the call. Outside the station, the newly arrived fleet began accelerating toward the inner system where the Empire's armada maintained its occupation blockade. Enemy command ships quickly detected the incoming force and repositioned their formations to intercept. For the first time since the war began, the Empire encountered an opponent it had never studied or catalogued. Human warships did not slow down. Missile batteries launched enormous volleys that streaked across space like storms of burning metal. Railgun cannons fired dense projectiles at velocities capable of shattering armored cruisers in a single strike. Carrier vessels released swarms of smaller attack craft that surged forward with aggressive speed. The first exchange of fire tore through the Empire's outer defensive line. Explosions lit the darkness as several enemy ships broke apart under the sudden barrage. Human vessels pushed directly into the expanding gaps, continuing their advance without hesitation. The alien observers watched in stunned silence. For weeks they had witnessed the Empire destroy every organized resistance across their territory. Fleet after fleet had fallen before the overwhelming strength of the invading armada. Yet the newly arrived human fleet showed no sign of fear or caution. They attacked as if the outcome had already been decided. Command transmissions among the human ships remained simple and direct. Target coordinates were distributed rapidly while battle groups adjusted formations in real time. When enemy cruisers attempted counterattacks, human destroyers maneuvered aggressively to intercept them. More hyperspace distortions continued appearing behind the first wave. Reinforcements. Additional human fleets emerged from jump space, expanding the battlefield until the Empire's once dominant armada found itself facing an opponent equal in numbers and far more relentless in strategy. The Empire had expected the final survivors of a defeated civilization. Instead, they had discovered a species that had spent centuries preparing for wars far larger than this one. Inside the hidden research station, the scientists slowly began to understand what had happened. Their distress signal had reached someone. And that someone had come to fight. For the first time since their civilization began collapsing, hope returned to the system. The aliens had believed they had no one left in the galaxy. But across the darkness of interstellar space, humanity had heard their call. And humanity had arrived with a fleet.